in. I hope you're all excited to cover Windows OS Part 2. Without further ado, let's kick that off. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Windows Server environment itself. We covered kind of the desktop, Windows desktop end, and we had a bit of a play with some of that, with some Codio sessions, which were really good. And we kind of left you to do a few of those, and hopefully you're able to do those without any problems. We are going to talk about Windows policies. We're going to introduce you to something called GPO, Group Policy Orchestrator. There's some definitions there. And we're going to talk about things like Active Directory, which is the way that Windows itself manages users, computers, and other items like that. As usual, if you have any questions during the session, please do fire them into the chat window. Love to pick those up, and we love to basically have interaction with you guys. So let's have a little look at Windows Server. Introduction to Windows Server. So the overview of Windows Server is a family of operating systems that are developed by Microsoft to provide the services and functions for networking environments. This is where big businesses sit in and they control all the systems through the servers. They can run on physical and virtual machines, indeed also in the cloud as well. And we'll talk about cloud in a further on lecture that we go to. And we can also have a hybrid situation. So you don't have to go, it's all on my estate, it's all on my own hardware, or it's basically on the cloud. You can happily have a mix of the two, and we'll talk about some of that as well. And we'll talk about what the Windows Server roles are and how it supports them and how it carries out those functions. These are roles such as file and print sharing, web hosting, email, database security, not so much email nowadays, but that sort of thing, isn't it? But we'll have some conversations around there. So there's several Windows versions. Okay, so Windows Server basically identified such as release dates, such as Windows Server 2012, 2016, 2019, 2022 is definitely out there. So Windows Server 2022 is the latest one out there. And there are different server editions. There are things such as a database version, the Windows Server database, which has different features to a regular Windows Server. So we will talk a little bit about some of those as well. But bear in mind that they are slightly different. The main differences between them is centered around how many virtual machines they will actually support, as well as having certain features such as a Hyper-V, which is the hypervisor which manages the virtual machines, special storage, failover clusters, Active Directory, and other features such as that. Now, we've mentioned Active Directory 2 to 3 times now, so let's have a little look at what Active Directory users and computers does for us. So Active Directory basically is Microsoft words here, a powerful, versatile tool that can administrate your Active Directory domain. This is where we control things such as our users. So when you log onto your local PC, we're all very familiar with this. Log onto our local PC, we have a username and we have a password. Okay, which is fantastic, which is great for our single system. But if we're basically looking at logging on to a PC within a corporate environment, well, we don't give ourselves that permission. The enterprise gives us that permission. The IT guys give us that permission. They give us the username, they give us the password, and they make us jump through some hoops for security checks. Okay, so that is all controlled within Active Directory users and computers. On the left-hand side there, you can see a general tree structure for Active Directory users and computers. That tree structure allows them to manage not just the users' accounts, but also the computer accounts, because it's important that IT controls different computers on our network. And it can make changes to those systems and control those systems. Now, Active Directory basically has an Active Directory interface, which is Active Directory SI, so ADSI. And there's also a lightweight directory access protocol, which is LDAP. And you can use that depending on your preferences. If you're running in a Microsoft environment, you tend to use the Active Directory end of things. Now, LDAP is a protocol that basically allows it to hook into Active Directory. And this is where we can then go Actually, we don't need just Windows systems anymore, because we can expand Active Directory to be able to manage our Linux systems. So we can get it to manage those, and we can even get it to manage our Mac systems if we choose to. And it can do that through what's known as LDAP, which is a lightweight directory access protocol. And that then tool basically means that it can control who can log on to not just the Windows systems and which Windows systems, but who can log on to the Linux and onto the Mac-based systems. Any questions around that? I am looking way over to my left at the moment. Don't get distracted, and I'm not actually reading anything. I am just preparing something. That's good. We are looking nice. Okay, so how does Active Directory look like? It is a tree structure. Okay, so in your company, you have users that are basically broken into groups. The users will have individual roles, but groups of many people can play different roles in particular groups. So we can define things such as our office managers and put them into a particular group. And that way, we don't have to define permissions for individual items. You look here, our art department. So all this art department, we stick into what is known as a group. And that group we can give the same permission to. For example, our art department may always want to print to the art printer rather than the printer that's in the HR director's office. So we can go, you guys will have access to that particular printer. We can also say, you have access to a particular file share, so a place on the network. You guys access SharePoint in a particular manner. You guys can run particular programs on your systems. So you can restrict it all the way down to what the users can actually do on those systems. So this itself here, as you're looking at, is basically a group for the art department. There's an IT department group and a sales department group. And we can get a managers group. We can also form an exec group. Hold on, Dave, they've crossed over groups. We've got two people, a variety of people there that are in multiple groups. Yes, you can basically have membership of multiple groups that can give you access to additional items. For example, the exec group and those particular managers in that exec group may have access to a particular file share, data and documents, particular systems. Whereas the two guys on the left, the poor art department director and the office manager, don't have access to those systems. So they can add additional items onto those. So you can see how basically by putting things into these systems, we make it more and more flexible and more control for the IT department to do granular control as well as broad strokes to change locations. So Active Directory basically organizes these into the following items. So what we have is each individual user or computer is actually called an object. So that's the way that Microsoft terms these things. They are objects. Then we have an organizational unit, which is a group of those objects in any particular format. And that's where we tend to allocate a lot of permissions. We can allocate permissions to an individual object. So there's no reason that one person in that particular group may have slightly more permissions than a few of the other people in that group. Okay, so they can be different and they are treated individually as well as a group. So if you want to make a broad change, you can make a change to the organization unit, and that is reflected across all those individual users within that OU, organizational unit. Then we have what's known as a domain, which is basically everyone within that particular location. Now we don't just stop at domain. You can see we've got forest, we've got tree and forest there. Now within a company, you may have multiple domains. So we could divide our domains, especially in the example here, as being different locations. Okay, we've got Boston, Seattle, Oregon. I was trying to read that really what I've written there. Oregon. So we've got a big plan company, which is defined as a structure there. And within that, we've got several different domains. And all those domains themselves can have individual locations and individual items. So we know our accounts department within Oregon lives in oregonbigplan.com, and our accounts department within Boston lives in boston.bigplan.com. And they have separate rights and relationships because they themselves are in individual organizational units. And then when we get even bigger than that, after forming our subdomain, we can get multiple trees. And of course, multiple trees can build out and out and out, and multiple trees we call a forest. Okay, the sensible thinking 101 there, you see. Can't see the trees for the forest. Now, all that is basically controlled and managed and structured within our Active Directory structures. Any questions about the difference between those particular structures that we have? We know we have a forest, which is everything. We have trees, which are individual items. And then we go back to organizational units. And then the objects themselves. Thumbs up if that is all fairly clear to you. All clear, thank you, Edward. Ronald's in there. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, so Active Directory allows us to organize those users' accounts into groups and apply individual permissions here. You can see in here we are looking at domain users, and we can go to properties for domain users. And we can modify those individual properties. This one here is basically modifying a property for that individual user, but I can put them into different groups as I fancy. So when we are creating an account, this particular user account that we're creating, we have to provide the first name, last name, display name. You have to there's a set of things we need to give in there. And we can make different objects in there and we can control it. And I think really the big takeaway from this is Active Directory users is there to control our users, control what they can do and what they can't do. The resources they have access to and the resources they do not have access to. It also controls their account, such as their password, and it controls basically how complicated that password must be, as well as things such as how often they can change it or how often they need to change it. Does it need to be a mix of characters and numbers? Does it need to have any special characters in it as well? So really creating an Active Directory user account. User accounts are essential for managing it. We do things with individual accounts. But before you can create a user, you've got to have an Active Directory system running. So that's a domain controller. So a domain controller that runs Active Directory on the systems. And then you have an administrative account that has permissions to user accounts and change those. And it's a great idea to have a user account naming conventions. Okay, because this allows us to split names and control them. And it means we do not have two David Tonkinsons, not that everyone else would be called David Tonkinsons, in our same group. We can basically break those up as well. So we can create that by opening Active Directory, snap in by clicking Start, dsa.msc and pressing enter. Oh my God, Dave, you've lost me. There you go. I knew I would lose everyone at this point because this is expected. So let's have a little look at that then. So when I run my server up, thumbs up if you can all see the beautiful server there. Good, we're getting some. Okay. So when I run my server up, it has a set of details of what's running on here. Active Directory I've got in here, I've got DNS, and I've got some other items. So if we're just focusing on Active Directory, on here I can run up Active Directory, and this is where I control my user accounts. And as you can see in here, I have a group called users, which is my generic users. I have some built-in users, which contains things such as my domain controllers, domain admins, and I have a set of computers that are in here as well. There's no computers in it because I've not added any. It's only on a virtual machine here. So from here, I can, for example, control this guest account by going into properties. And you can see here, this is where we get the control. So that's just a really quick demo of going into that and how we get into there. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but this is basically what we're saying is we're opening Active Directory users and computers. We can expand the particular tree that we want to basically control, which is our organizational unit, and then we can add new users as we like. When we're adding a new user, it's going to ask us for a username and a password. Also an email address. Well, gets an email address, basically gets allocated in accordance with it. A lot of the time, if you're a first line support tech, you will be doing a lot of password resets and things like that for users because they tend to forget them. And in that, we basically control things such as our password history. So it enforces the user to make sure they change the password to something they've not used before. You can set a different set of cycles. So you can say you can only recycle it every 4 or 5 password changes. We can set things such as our maximum password age. Do we want users to change their passwords every 3 months, 6 months, or 8 months? There's some really good conversations around passwords and security around how we manage that. We know most people, not most people, that's the wrong way to put it. We know that a lot of people are generally fairly lazy in terms of their passwords. If they log onto a computer system, not only are they using password 1234, but potentially if you then go, you've got to reset your password, they put in password 12345. Okay, well, we don't want that. So to prevent that, there's some thinking out there that says actually we shouldn't be asking them to reset the password. We should be forcing them to make it a complex password to start with. And if you give them one really complex password and go, okay, you can have that for 2 years, then they will have one really complex password rather than a simple password that they keep updating slightly. It's all a conversation around security there. Okay, and then of course there's the password complexity. As I've said, basically you can vary these, and I'm sure a lot of you have basically had these conversations around a lot of your passwords already, where you have numbers, letters, special characters. How long does it need to be? Does it have to have a mix? Does it have to make sure it doesn't contain things such as your real names or any real words in there? It can get more and more complex. But this is what we can set in Active Directory. So that's users, so we control users, but we also control computers in here. So we can define what computers basically have. So in here, we can basically look at Active Directory users and computers. We can look at AWS reserved, FSX, and in there we've got some computers because in this particular group of computers, we're allocating all these computers in here to have particular rights. Okay, rights, features, other things like that. So just as with my individual user, I can say this group of users cannot run, for example, the command prompt. So they're not allowed to run the command prompt. I can do the same thing for computers. I can put computers into a group and lock it down so much that all they can access is a browser. Okay, we can turn it very simply into a dumb terminal mode where it can't do anything. It just simply runs scrolling systems. And that's what we can do with that. So not only can we control the user, we can control the computer. And when we log on to a computer, we get a blend of the two. And this allows me as a user to log on to any computer within my environment that I have permissions to log on to. So bang, we've got hot desking. I don't have to carry a laptop around. I can simply walk up to any machine. I can log on as myself because it knows who I am, and it will give me my home directory. It will give me access to all my particular files and folders that I should have. And every time I hit print, it will go to the right printer that I want it to go to, regardless of where I log on to in my building, in my company, wherever it is across the world. Because remember, we can actually control things such as printer location, not just from my account, from me logging on, but we control printer location from the computer itself. So if I have a set of group there that basically says these are all the hot desk computers that are in Boston head office, every time anyone from my company logs into the Boston head office, it sets the printer to be the Boston printer. So if I get a guy coming in from Philadelphia, he runs up his system, logs on, hits print. It doesn't go to Philadelphia and he has to get him to fax it over. Fax, how old is that? Doesn't get the fax over. It automatically goes, mate, you're in Boston. I'll set you up with a Boston printer. And it prints to the Boston printer. So you can see how Active Directory has a great deal of control about what we can and cannot do. We can massively lock things down on there. So as I say, Active Directory is a directory service developed by Microsoft that essentially provides centralized management of network resources, users, computers, printers, groups, and policies. These tend to be broken into things such as your federated services, your Active Directory central management, your certificate services. So if we have certificates accessing things like banking, we have auto certification. That gets controlled by Active Directory. Right management services. What rights do we have when we do particular things? Can this particular user make changes in Active Directory? So anyone within IT, do they have full rights to make changes in Active Directory? Do they have full rights to make changes onto SharePoint? All that sort of rights are controlled. And it also supports a great deal of what we know as the authentication and authorization for network users and devices. So if I log onto a network device, that network device will know me and it will tell me through Active Directory what I can and cannot do on that network device in terms of changing it. Now, one statement I will make at this point, it is critical that you do not, in any company, go, we're going to have a general admin account. And you hand that out to all the people in IT or some people in IT, and you go, there's an admin account for doing the administration on such and such a server or doing administration on Active Directory, because that account means you then lose all auditing process. What you need to have is you need to have an audit log throughout the system that says Peter Smith logged on to this particular system and made this particular change. If you hand out an administrative account that's a global account that you give to everyone, you lose all auditing. You've got no idea who made that change. And that is critical for all auditing processes. Is everyone totally blown away, or are you all following that? Ahmed, give me a thumbs up. I'm only picking on you because I can see you in my screen. You good? Sebastian is good. Fantastic. Seth is hunky-dory. Thank you very much. So we talked a little bit about the certification of services, which is a component of Active Directory that provides public keys and for infrastructure. So PKI services used for such as managing digital certifications. So you can see Active Directory is critical for us. Yes, it is essentially our lifeblood. We need to build in redundancy and resilience to the system. If we don't do that, if my single Active Directory server goes pop, mate, I'm in a whole world of hurt. It takes years to get a lot of this stuff correct, years to get it basically all put in properly. And you imagine Active Directory is basically put in when a company grows to a certain size. 10 years down the line, that has all changed, it's all developed, it's all evolved into something slightly different. It goes pop and we lose it. Oh my God, we're in tears, aren't we? So we build in redundance and resilience. So we have multiple domain controllers and they will talk to each other. So my domain controller in Boston will happily talk to my one in Philadelphia. And if I make a change in the one in Philadelphia, that gets reflected across back to my domain controller in Boston. And I can indeed have multiple domain controllers all over the place. We can even push this up into the cloud. And we can have cloud-based Active Directory. Now, Microsoft went through a few name changes with the cloud-based Active Directory. It's now called Entra ID. And it's used certainly from the Microsoft Azure side of things. And it can sync with your local Active Directory machines. So any changes you make on your local domain controllers gets reflected onto Entra. Any changes you make on Entra can get reflected back onto your DCs. Another benefit of having multiple domain controllers is we can do maintenance. If I have to make a change on one of my domain controllers, I can do that without actually worrying so much. I can do that, I drop it down, and of course, any user then that needs authentication through Active Directory will simply go, I can't find that domain controller, I'm going to go to that one over there. So it will simply pop on to the next domain controller. And it also gives us protection against corruption, because we can use resilient storage, backups, and we can go to last known good states on particular systems if they do fail. But of course, we eliminate a lot of that with RAID devices and other forms of redundancy management. Any questions around that then? God, this is lovely. I'm creating this. As you haven't given me any questions, I'm going to ask you some. See how this works. Okay, do you want to all join the Kahoot? Because we're going to smash into Kahoot now. We're going to have a couple of Kahoot questions. Because we all want to win the virtual sweeties that come out at the end of the day. Good, I can see we've got a fair few in there. That's great. You have your thumbs up if you're all ready to go. If you haven't managed to get on there and you want me to hold on for a second, then please wave at me or type something so I don't kick it off and you miss out. Cablan's good, love it. Peter, thank you. Okay, without further ado, let's kick it off then. So you'll start for 10. So old quiz show I need to do. OS part 2. True or false? Active Directory is used to administrate users and computers. Fastest fingers first, remember. Super quick gets the big score. Oh, everyone give yourself a pat on the back. 100%. I don't think I've seen 100% before. Well done. So it is definitely true. It is used to administrate our users and computers. Luca looks like it hit that one first. Well done. Luca, Cablan, Mardi. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, didn't I? A group of some domain under one domain is called a tree. Well done. Remember we talk about trees and forests. 17. Well done for 17 getting that right. Well done. Well, it's a big change at the top there. Gabino leaping to the top, meta use. Paul, fantastic. Let's see if we can change that in this last one for this particular section. I think we've got about 9 questions. Put these in order of size. Smallest at the top, largest at the bottom. or one person getting there really quickly. You're going to get bonus points, obviously. Let's see if you get this one right then. Okay, yes, smallest is the object. Then we go to the OU or organizational unit. Then we hit tree. Then we hit forest. Well, thank you very much. I think you've done really well in that particular short quiz. Let's see how it changes. Sebastian, what happened there? Leapt right to the top. You weren't even on the board. Well done, Sebastian. Let's see how we go on from there. There is more Kahoot quizzes later on, so you can obviously make up the ground if anyone didn't quite get all of those right. So do we need to put everything in a domain? As soon as I plug 2, 3, 4, 10, 400 machines together, do we need to go, we need a domain? Simple answer to that is no. You do not need to have them in a domain for them to talk to each other. But, and there's a very big but, so you can simply just define a work group. So work groups essentially are those people that do not want to run a server. Why would I want to run a server? If I'm accessing cloud stuff, all basically using SaaS products, software as a service, I've got 5 to 6 machines and a little office. Why would I want to put a massive domain controller on the side of someone's desk and go, that's going to manage all our domain stuff? And the simple answer is I don't. I can run it in what's known as a work group. So it's a small local network, suitable for homes, small businesses. Setup is very simple. You just join the same work group. Very low cost. You're not buying a server. You're not buying a server license. Security is low because there's a certain amount of lack of password protectivity in there in terms of the centralized controlling. So the control level is controlled at the individual computers, not at a centralized domain controller. Great for small business, as I said. Domains, yes. As soon as you start with the domain, you've got server. Gets a bit complex. You need to know someone. You need to have someone who knows what they're doing with Active Directory. Expensive. Microsoft will probably disagree with that. Yes, you do need to buy hardware or virtual machines or the equivalent. Tighter security, that is the must for a lot of companies. You need tighter security, password protections in there. Sensitive data can be shared and basically hidden away. And it's a high level of control. So your network administrator basically control the entire domain from his desk. Okay, it's great for large and complex distributed networks. 5 or more users, I'd probably recommend as soon as you're probably getting above 5, 6, 7, and you're stretching out, potentially you want to be thinking about putting a domain in there. Any questions about the difference between a work group and a domain? Domains are massively scalable. You can kind of go from 5 to 10 users to 50,000 users if you want. As long as you can get your head around some of the complexity. Good stuff. Okay. So file shares. Yes, part of what we do is we share files with each other. I like to think of file shares as ideally a single point of truth. So that if you're modifying a document that is shared amongst everyone else, it's on a file share. Everyone is modifying that one document. You're not sending a document around on email where Peter adds a few little pieces to it, sends it on to Jane, Jane adds a few pieces, sends it on to Roy, Roy then sends it on to Sarah. And then by the time I get it back, I've got 4 different versions of that document that I've then either got to merge in or tell the others that actually Jane at the end of that chain has modified what Roy basically put in. And Roy will go, oh, how can we change it? No. File shares allow you to have a single point of truth on the system. So it's a centralized storage. So it improves the organization of it and you get access control. So I can prevent people from reading documents I can make people read the documents, but not modify the documents, or I can give them full editable rights. It's great for collaboration, great for remote access because I don't care where you are because it's a centralized location. Cost effective because I'm not basically putting it onto loads of different machines. And these are called shares. Consideration is you've got to think about some scalability issues. Okay, because if people put things on there, how do we manage the growth of that data? Data volume and data growth is something that is quite a concern within IT because, you know, you may put a 2 terabyte server with a file share on. 2 years down the line, you may actually need more than 2 terabytes. There may be a case of that. Security, maintaining strong security measures is crucial. But we can do that, we just said, through Active Directory. Bang, we've got a solution for that one. And performance, like everything that is not at your desk, at your fingertips, there is a performance because it goes across the network. It's not drastic nowadays because our network bandwidths are so much better, but there is always a performance thing if you are not dealing it with it on your local machine. Now, we talked about UNCs, universal naming conventions, didn't we? I'm trying to think what it was last week, wasn't it? Crikey, was it that long ago? Where we talked about a universal naming convention consisting of 2 slashes, a server name, / a share name, and then a slash and any subfolder. So you can have multiple subfolders on that. Okay, so that is a UNC path. Now, a lot of the time, Microsoft basically likes to divide things up and give them drive letters. So we'll give them things such as a valid drive letter for those items. Now, the difference, as I said last week, was basically the difference between a UNC and a drive letter is that it's specific. So wherever I live and wherever I come from, the UNC, the 2 slashes server name / share name would always get me to exactly the same location. With a drive letter, it could be that drive letter is mapped differently. I could have, for example, my Z drive mapped to a file share in a different location. Okay, if I changed offices, they may have a Z drive mapped to a totally different location. It is possible that someone may change that location. Now, it's good, you know, there's pros and cons for either. As I say, UNC will always get you to the single server. If your IT department then goes, actually, that file server 1, we've got to take it offline. We've got to make it redundant because it's old, it's archaic. We're replacing it with new Wizzy super file server 1. Okay, so my UNC path now becomes invalid. The benefit with a drive letter is the IT department can remap that drive letter Z to the Super Wizzy file server 1 without any problems. They can very simply do it within Active Directory. Click, click, off it goes. We've now got a different GPO policy that says this is where you're mapping that drive letter to. And I wouldn't know any difference. IT's moved all the files, they've spun up the new file server. All my links work perfectly okay. Does everyone understand about files, about the UNCs and the drive letters on Windows? I know we've got some Mac users out there. Give me a shout if you don't quite get that. Well, I think we should be pretty good, shouldn't we? So, but when we are mapping our drives, we basically do use a UNC. You can see here, this UNC, if you can read the faded text there, is actually using an IP address. Now, I know we haven't covered IP addresses, but we're probably fairly familiar with it, and we will go into more details. But that isn't actually using the computer name, that is using an IP address to map 192.168.101.209 / share as the H drive for this particular system. Good stuff. So within our file shares, and indeed with everything we basically do with individual files, we have access rights. Now, the general access rights considered within Windows are read, write, create, delete, and modify. Okay, and they do exactly what it says on the tin. If you have read rights to that particular file, yes, you can open it and read it. You cannot modify it unless you have the modified right. Okay, sorry, you cannot write to it unless you have the right ones. And you can change the file permissions if you have modify. So you can give people access to things without enabling them to change it for everyone else. And the create and delete is normally related to a folder that simply says, yes, you can create new files in this folder and delete the files on the folder. Now, what Windows does is, because we know that all our file systems are based on a tree principle, it has inherent policies. So when we give someone full read-write access to a folder, we automatically give them full read-write access inherently to those files that underlie that folder, that are containers in that folder, as well as the folders that are contained within that folder. So it kind of cascades down the line when you give people these inherent permissions. You can break the inherent permission. In our example here, you see the top folder with 3 files. We've broken the inherency to the one on the right. We've only given them read only. So we can do that to control that permission. So if I was to make any changes to the breaking inheritance folder at the top, the read write one, that will still be reflected, but only reflected into the 2 on the left. It will not be reflected to the one that we have broken the inherent permission to. Now, once you understand that, then you realize there's possible pain down the line. The pain down the line is that we normally have a lot of folder structures. So we have a folder in a folder in a folder. So some folders further down the line, for example, accounts may have a sub-accounts folder, then they may have an accounts folder for different companies that they're dealing with accounts for, and then subfolders for different branches of those companies. Well, it's possible that we may have an accountant that is the only person that should have access to that top level folder. And of course, once we change that and break that inheritance, if that guy leaves, we've then got to make sure that we reallocate that inheritance to let someone else see that folder. Otherwise, it may disappear, may not be able to access for anyone else in the company. But we can't do that simply by changing the top level folder permissions. We've got to go specifically into that location and go re-establish the inherency so that it will then pick up everything from those other folders. And then we can start again with how we control it. Forests and trees, we're not really dealing with the Active Directory. Yes, there is, because there's inherency through those. And we can basically control those. But normally it's the first one that it hits in there. Hello, a very good question. So what you do with forests and trees, I'll answer that question because it is actually really good question there. I'm going to send you a special set of sweeties for that one. So within our forests and trees, when we basically look at our forest, yeah, let's look at our forest. When we look at our forest, which contains all the individual trees, I can make a change to the permissions in my forest that would then naturally be reflected up into the trees. Now, it will naturally be reflected up into the trees unless that particular tree structure has its own item for that particular option. So, for example, if we're controlling access to a shared drive, okay, if I make a global permission in my forest that says everyone can access this shared drive, that's fantastic. But then in my Boston tree says, oh, Boston doesn't get access to that. Boston will still not get access because it takes the highest level. And that reflects further down. So if there's an OU within Boston that then says they can have access to it, well, strangely enough, that access will be granted. And then further down, if there's a user within that OU that says they cannot have access, then again, that person is taken out of that access group. So it's inherited down. Okay, but basically you do not overwrite on that way if it's specifically granted or denied within that individual tree, forest, organizational unit or object. Does that answer that one, Paolo? Did that answer that one for everyone? Thumbs up from everyone if they kind of understood that concept. Luca's good, Edward's good, CR's good. Oh, look at that, loads of people. Maximilian Cabinet. Okay, that's good. It's important that we understand that. Kabitsu, I can see you've raised a hand. We don't tend to raise hands in this because I tend to look at the live chat window. Do you have a question in the live chat? And if it's something I can't pick up, then we can get one of the C1 staff to grab it if you're having problems. Good, perfect. My exhaustive answer. Thank you, Pally, for an exhaustive answer. So we kind of covered that: drive letters, file shares, access, the rights and permissions, and inherency. Go careful when you break the inherency because it then means, to say, all changes below that will not get reflected through. And I've had some really tricky conversations with financial directors about what some people can and can't access because of inherency and non-inherency. Make sure you get it right and test that it's right rather than making any assumptions there. Okay, any other questions? I think we're going to aim for a 10-minute break around now, which would be perfect if we can, Rasha. Have we got any other questions around the file sharing concepts? And drive letters, UNCs, Universal Naming Conventions. Are we all good to basically have a little break, an early break? We'll get a coffee, banana, before we dive into our Windows policies. Cool, that's good. Okay, well, I think I will hand you over to the music maestro and we'll listen to some music while we have a 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, thumbs up if we're all ready to go. Let's have a look through Windows policies. Maximilian, Precious, Marty, Luca. Perfect. Let's kick it off then. Okay, so what we do within Windows policies, this is obviously part of Active Directory. We have what is known as group policies. So as we basically define groups, we can define policies. How granular can we get with this? You ask yourselves. We can get crazy granular in here with this sort of stuff. So they basically think of these group policies as a set of rules and settings that can be applied to particular groups of users. Now we've got our users in groups, let's apply different policies. Okay, so you can use the GPO, Group Policy Orchestrator, to configure various different aspects in there. You can see in there, I think you can see the user rights assignments, and you can see things like access controls in there as well. So there's hundreds of settings that can be performed. So a lot of the time, if you are asked to basically, and you're asked to, can you restrict things? Can you tie things up? Can you give access to? Can you set things? The general answer is probably going to be yes. Okay, and the idea is that you could then go off to a beautiful website or talk to Microsoft and you can see exactly which setting you will need to make the changes to. So we can do things such as security settings. Okay, this is where we control things such as your password policy, account lockouts policies, audit policies, user rights assignments, security options, firewall settings, encryption. So we can control all that end of things. You know, we can very happily, from group policies, force every single person in the sales group to have an encrypted disk drive. Not your choice, we're making you have it. Okay, it's as simple as that. We can make software settings where we can control what automatically gets deployed to a machine. So if I log onto a machine, the GPO, Group Policy Orchestrator, can say, David always has Microsoft Office installed on this machine. Let me put that on there. Let me make sure it's there or make sure that he can access that. We can do things such as a classic one for Office users and lovers is templates. Okay, Word, PowerPoint have what's known as templates, and these are ones that control things such as your heading level, so your first heading level, your second heading level, how your bullets and styles look. So if you've got a company that says, hey, you know what, our default documentation is all written in Times Roman, and we're going to have all our headings are going to be 24, all our subheadings are going to be 11, they're going to be slightly indented, our body text is going to be in bright blue, some crazy font in there as well, then yes, you have a template that basically does that. Now your GPO can go, every single machine and every single user will have this template applied to their Microsoft Office. So rather than everyone coming in and going, oh God, where's that template I need to open? What sort of style was heading level 1? What sort of style was heading level 3? Oh my God, I've never used bullet points before. What does my bullet points look like? You basically have a template forced on you that you just open up and go, oh, there it is. It's all done and dusted. It's great for us. I used it really massively in Nats because we had we had a company there that basically had a whole load of trainers, and they were producing training material in totally different styles. We didn't have a corporate image that was coming out to everyone. We simply just had, well, Joe will do it this way and Peter will do it this way. And I kind of went, no, we need to have templates. We need to give a corporate image. So everyone was basically producing it in the same style. And it was available for them. Previously, they'd have to go and copy it from a file server, put it onto the machine, apply it to their particular presentation. No, just forced across with GPO. Thanks for your time. And in there, separate thing, administrative templates can be basically configured and formed to allow Windows components, such as your control panel desktop. So we can control that. A classic one is to disable the command prompt. Do we want our users to be able to run the command prompt? Get DOS level access to things? No, it's a simple answer. Most of our users don't really want to touch that stuff. So this is what we do with GPOs. We lock it down. Do we want them to be able to install applications? Hell no. We want them to basically use the applications we've given them. So we lock things down with the GPO. So you can see here the group policies are basically applied in a particular manner. They're applied from the root level. So they're done in a hierarchical order, starting from the local GPO on the computer, followed by your site GPO, domain GPO, OUs, and the higher and higher you go, then basically they get overridden or not. So you can see from the root there, we've got policy 1, then we've got sales department, which is policy 2, user level, which has our winning policy settings. So our password settings are A, our Windows firewall settings are B, our Internet Explorer settings are D. So it's done in that particular order. It's kind of nice because it's exactly the same order as we apply Forest stuff. So we can create different group policies in a handy group policy orchestrator. Now, again, you can see in here, we are looking at user configurations, and we drill down into under user configurations, there's administrative templates. And with administrative templates, you can see we've got desktop, network, shared folders, we've got system. So if we go into system, there's a setting in system that allows us to run only specified Windows applications. So I can double click on that and I can just pick what I want them to run. Now, there are hundreds, stroke thousands of settings. So we don't expect you to remember them. We just expect you to know you use the GPO, Group Policy Orchestrator, to control these particular settings. So any particular setting you fancy. Anyone got any great questions about GPOs? This next one basically moderates the control panel within groups. So here we've got a user configuration. Now it's applied to the user. So whenever this user logs onto the system, they're prohibited access to the control panel. So they cannot modify something in the control panel. Boo, here, so they can't change the backdrop. Oh, how mean is that not? Okay, so this is what you can lock it down to. Okay, you can take away all the user's fun. make them get on with some real work. It's not really the aim of IT, is it? And we can set things such as your access control. So on this particular one, we can see that the administrator has particular ownership of a particular drive, and other users can have a variety of different access controls given to them. So we talked about the file sharing rights before. So file sharing basically is a process of giving people access to the shares or not to the shares, what they can do, view, edit, downloads on there as well. So file sharing can be done through this as well. And remember, we can grant them or we can remove them. The owner is normally an owner or stroke administrator. Now, when you join IT, when you join an IT department, you will tend to, if it's a small company, they will tend to go, here's administrative rights. Now, if you have administrative rights over the domain, then you've got an awful lot of control over everything. So you can come in and go, I'm a domain administrator. You can log onto the system, you make whatever changes you like. You can log onto a server and make whatever changes you like. And normally when a company gets bigger, they kind of go, well, we don't want all our IT people to do this. We only want the people that are qualified in administrating domains to do this. So they make a different group that says, oh, you are domain administrators and you can control this lot. You guys are IT support specialists and you get these rights. So it all gets split out. Again, it's all about file sharing, access rights, and the control of it. But there's a couple of best practices here around using your basic files and basically getting these things right. You should identify the purpose and scope of the sharing. Why are we sharing it? Who needs to access it? Okay, how important is this documentation? And then you need to classify the files and folders according to their sensitivity and importance. Now, what category do they fall into? Is our business going to crawl over if these disappear? In which case, we probably want to go a little bit tighter on the security on those. And we tend in IT to always apply the principle of least privileged. Okay, only the owner and administrator can grant permissions, and they should always look at granting the minimum access, not the maximum access, the minimum access. And we tend to use encryptions and passwords to access sensitive stuff. So does it need to have a separate password and security system to get onto these files or not? Great stuff. Right, okay, I'm going to dive into another Kahoot set. Let's see if we can shake the apple cart and see what we can do here. Sebastian rocketed to the top. True or false? Group policies applied in a hierarchical order. Oh, so many of you must have been ready on that one. I saw the number answered shoot right up. Oh, perfect. Another 100% score. Well done, everybody. Let's see how that affects the leaderboard. Oh, Sebastian must have been ready for that one. Matthias, Luca, Paul B, Gabino. Up 3 places for Cablan. Ice climber, well done. See about this question here then. Multi-select. Group policies will allow me to control, select all that apply. So everyone that applies in this, tick that box. Oh, I see we split a few things there. Everything. Mate, GPO, you can control everything that your users can do. Software installation, yeah, what software they get, can they do in new installations? The Windows environment, how it looks, how it feels. You can set backgrounds. You can set sizes, scaling, zooming. Access to file shares, 100%. Password policies, yes. All of that stuff you can basically control. Let's see how that separates things. Oh, Sebastian got it right. Well done. Luca, whipping up. Great stuff. Any questions about that before we kind of dive on to the next topic? Cool, you're all cracking through this, really enjoying it. Again, more questions is great. There isn't anything, there's no such thing as a silly question. Networking services. So within the Windows Server environment, the Windows also provides your network services, specifically domain network services. Now we're going to use the simple form of DNS. Yeah, because it doesn't get overcomplicated, and we'll talk about the more complicated end of things later on. So DNS stands for domain name services. It basically translates a human readable domain name, such as www.google.com, into an IP address, a numeric IP addresses. Now we're only going to talk IPv4 at this stage. We'll talk 6 later. Okay, now IP addresses is basically 4 sets of numbers. Okay, 172.217.14.206. So DNS will go, you're looking for Google, I convert that to that IP address. Think of it as simple as that. Now let's have a little test here. Everyone pick a domain they like. No, I'm not going to do that. I haven't done networking. We'll do that when we do networking. We won't do it yet. Jumping ahead of myself there. I get so excited doing this stuff. So DNS works by using a hierarchical name system of services. Okay, this is where we talk about distributing information about domains and IP addresses. So my particular client, how my client knows where to go, on my system, I might know the local areas. I tend to think about it as being a bit like an address book. I might know the local area. Now, when I basically want to get to this example here, this test.example.com, my system, if it doesn't know where it is, doesn't know the IP address, it will go to my default domain server, DNS server. Who knows where their default DNS server is? You've all got one. I'll give you a clue. It's fairly local to you. And please smash it into live chat if you know. If you know where it is or what it is. Local network. It's not the local network. We're after an individual device on your local network. Seth says ISP. Oh, close, Seth, but no bananas. You all have an individual device that is a primary, your default DNS server for you, Seth. Second shot, spot on. Your router. Zachariah, well done. Magelchi. I pronounced that horribly wrong. I tell you, I have some fun problems with names sometimes. Luca. Yes, your router. That little toy that you've got from either Virgin Networks, BT, or whatever your supplier happens to be in your country. Yes, that router is your default DNS server. That's where your laptop, your MacBook, your PC, or whatever it is you happen to have, if that doesn't know it on its own address list, because it has its own address list, it goes out and says, I don't know where it is. Who am I going to ask? It goes to that router and says, router, do you know where it is? Okay. And that router will either know the answer or it will go out to essentially another DNS server. Now that second DNS server that potentially gets hit, Seth, is provided by the ISP. So if you've ever configured your own router, you notice it has 2 DNS servers. Why, in live chat, why do we have 2 DNS servers? Type an answer in live chat if you know why we'd always have 2 DNS servers. If you don't know, you can put your hand up and say, I don't know. Oh, bird, that's great. In case one fails from Cablan, yes. Redundancy. If one's failed, one's down. God, yeah, why would we not have two? That's the idea. It's basically to cover us. This is all part of the World Wide Web. This is really the structure of the web that also always says never have just one. Okay, one is a total failure because if it goes down, you're just dead in the water. So you have two. So one goes down, you just talk to the other one. Off you go. Fantastic. Simple as that. Thank you very much, Precious. I love the honesty. So normally we have two DNS servers. Okay, so what it does is it goes to our router and says, do you know where it is? If our router doesn't know where it is, the router goes out to the ISP and says, do you know where it is? If the ISP doesn't know where it is, well, the ISP phones up someone else and says, do you know where this is? And so on until someone says, oh, I know where this one is. And then it comes back down the line with an answer saying, this is where it is. And that tells your laptop where it is. And then you've got a full, complete DNS workout. Like I say, I like to think of it as sort of address books. And if I look up in my personal address book for a plumber, I go, I haven't got a plumber. I'll speak to my friend. And if my friend doesn't have a plumber, he'll speak to his friend who may have a plumber. And we may speak to 2, 3, 4, 5 different friends. And one of them will have a plumber and come back to me and say, here's a plumber, he's in Dunbar. It's exactly like that. Can they both fail? Yes, they can both fail. Generally, ISPs will only ever drop one DNS server at any one time for maintenance. And if they do drop it, they tend to put another one in. So, yes, you definitely can basically fail too. Good. How does that feel for everyone? So we will go into a bit more detail about DNS and some of the other DNS settings you can have when we talk networks and a bit more complicated stuff. But that is as complicated as your DNS resolution is. Now, one thing I am going to answer straight away is there is a live time for any DNS registry. So my laptop, all your systems have a DNS registry on them. So we know, so we don't have to keep going out and asking again and again and again who google.com is. We basically, when we get the result back, we store that and we keep it in our DNS. So when we next go out to Google, we go, oh, right, I know what it is. But every time we get a response back, our first response comes back and says, it is this IP address. That IP address and translation comes with a time for life. So essentially a lifetime. So it may be 6 hours, maybe 10 hours, and that's set later on, and we'll talk about how that's set. But that basically means in 5 to 10 hours, say for example, it's set to 10 hours. In 10 hours, if I ask that question again, my system will go, that's out of date. I'm going to recheck. And it rechecks it. And this is what makes the World Wide Web so flexible. Because it means if I move something to a different IP address, it only takes that number of hours for it to be refreshed, not just on my machine, but across the entire world. Okay, so I make a small change in my website to a different location, put it on a different provider. I know I'm not going to phone everyone up and make that change. The system will do it because that domain IP address will basically die, stop being live, and everyone will restart asking, and they'll all be poked through to the correct address. And that's a TTL time. No VPN basically forms part of DNS. All VPNs basically do is it provides you a tunnel. It doesn't provide you any addressing. So a VPN will go from A to B, may go to Europe if you're talking personal VPNs, may go to France, for example, but the DNS will still be the same location. So it still be done in the same way. Normally what will happen in this case, if you do have a VPN, say for example, I'm in the UK, I've got a VPN to France, my first stop will probably be my router. But if I've established a VPN, my first stop will probably be the VPN server DNS at the end of the VPN, because that will be my tunnel route. Does that answer that one for you? You're stepping well ahead of yourself there, young man. But we like those questions. Good. The VPN will never actually change the IP address for the location you're trying to reach. For example, google.co, well, my website. So my website is on a particular IP address. If I go to France, my website is still on the same IP address. If I go to Germany, it's still the same IP address. Okay, it doesn't matter where I VPN to or where I move my system to, it's still the same global IP address. Good stuff. Right, DNS, really simple, converts beautiful English names or beautiful names that we can read into IP addressing. And it goes the other way as well. Good, DHCP. Who's had a DHCP before? Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. This is what hands out IP addresses for us. There are other ways to get IP addresses, and you can manually apply IP address to your system. So you can imagine if I wanted to manually provide an IP address to my system, I could do. I put it on 192.168.1.10. Thank you very much. Now, if I'm an IT manager, I'm running 500 other machines. I don't want to go around to each machine and go, well, you're 10, you can be 11, you can be 12, you can be 28, you can be 36. Oh, hold on, didn't I give 36 to that machine over there? No, we don't want that. We want something to look after it. This is what DHCP basically does for us. So within DHCP, we configure what is known as a scope. Now, a scope is the range of IP addresses. You can see in here, the example here, the starting IP address is 192.168.0.50, and the ending address, 192.168.0.200. There you go. That's your IP address range. So when I turn a machine on and it connects to this DHCP system, it goes to it and says, can I please have an IP address? And it does it through something called Dora. And we all love Dora. She's a fantastic explorer. But Dora basically is the way we work with DHCP. So the client will discover an IP address. The server will then offer you an IP address. The recipient will then say, that's good, I'd like that address. And the server then goes, yeah, we're good on that, you can have it. Now, the reason it goes backwards and forwards is because the server doesn't know if that client has gone to another DHCP server and got a different response. So it's possible we may have 2, 3, 4 DHCP servers in our network. So that's why it has to go backwards and forwards, because it basically says, can I have an IP address? 3 servers basically come back and say, well, you can have this one, this one, or this one. And the guy says, oh, actually, I'd like this one, ends in 12. Sends it out, and the guy says, yeah, 12's good, off you go and take that. So this is why we use Dora. So discovery, offer, request, acknowledge. Now I'm going to ask another question for you in live chat. Where is your DHCP server that you are allocated an IP address from? Router, look at that. We all learn, we're learning, it's fantastic. Yes, your router. Man, your router does an awful lot, doesn't it? Does a DHCP, does your DNS, does your routing. We won't go into that yet. Good stuff. Now that's for you. When you get into a business environment, yes, the DHCP server is located on one of your servers. Okay, so one of your servers will be DHCP. Anyone got any questions about that? Good stuff. Okay, that's great. I'm just letting something bring up a second. So we're going to, let me drop back one. We're going to drop back one really quickly, I think. Bear with me a second. I'm just basically poking up a virtual machine. Hopefully it's going to be quick. Only a little bit slow because somewhere along the lines it decided to shut itself down because I wasn't using it. It's a bit mean of it, wasn't it? I might just let that start. Yeah, let's let that start. Okay, we'll let that start. So databases, yes, we all know about, well, databases are fantastic things. So database is basically a collection of structured data. Now I'm using that word very loosely because we can have unstructured databases that are stored and accessed and manipulated by essentially computer programs. Okay, there are lots of different ones. Think about it. I'm going to use a horrible term here. Think about it like lots of Excel spreadsheets that are basically linked up to each other. That's probably a very poor definition of a database because we now know that SQL databases and NoSQL databases and object-oriented databases are in existence, and we use those all the time, as well as our large language models, which aren't quite like that. But databases are a set of data that is either related to each other. This one shows a relational database because items are related to each other. You will see a brand that is related to a brand item. You will see a customer name that's related to a customer name in the product field, as it is in the transaction, as it probably is in the item, as it is in the cashier. So these are related and they're called relational databases. But there is non-relational databases as well. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. So this basically means there's a query language called SQL that allows you to chat to that database. So you can say, get this particular details from that database and give it back to me. And you can say put, which puts that some more details into that database. So SQL and other databases. So comparing SQL features and vendors, Oracle, PostgreSQL, Teradata, Microsoft SQL Server. There's NoSQL out there. There's loads of different databases. Okay, so there's not one course that fits all. These can be installed on servers, on Windows servers. Windows servers tend to have something like a SQL database, but you can install NoSQL on there as well. And you can install a product called MySQL, which is a free product. I believe it used to be free anyway. You can install Oracle on there as well, which is another really good, complicated database. So you can install these on servers. Any questions about databases and what they are? We don't need to get overcomplicated on these. All we need to know is that they do exist. They live on servers or in the cloud nowadays a lot. And SQL stands for SQL Structured Query Language. Perfect. So you've heard me mention MMC snap-ins. Well, I haven't mentioned snap-ins. I've mentioned the Microsoft Management Console. Possibly. I've mentioned Active Directory and a few other options like that. No, we can do this in two ways. One, I can talk you through a slide, or two, I can probably show you. I'm just basically running things up now. Okay, so let's have a little look at console. So when you first start a Windows environment, a Windows Server environment, what you tend to get presented with is you'll get presented with this Server Management Dashboard. Server Management Dashboard will show you what you've got installed. You can see in here, I've got a Active Directory, I've got DNS, and I've got a file storage. Now, from this dashboard, I can look at my local services, those on that particular server, or I can look at all servers. Hold on, I can manage all servers just from one location. Yes, that's the idea. You can manage multiple Active Directories, you can manage DNSs, you can manage everything that is on your server estate from one location. This is only a single one, so unfortunately, I've only got the one server. But if I wanted to add something, for say, for example, I wanted to add a DHCP onto this particular server, I can simply add a role and feature. I can install a particular role. So if I wanted to add, I can add it to different servers as well. So I can want to add it, say I want to add a DHCP onto this system. Select DHCP. I can select add this particular feature, and it will go off and add that particular feature. I won't do it because it will take about 2 minutes to install it. So you can see you can add and remove. And I can manage them from here, but I can also manage them individually. So I can run up Active Directory in its own right, where I can see my Active Directory. And I can manage things such as my DNS by running up DNS. But you saw there was loads and loads of different features in there. So what we have is we have a Microsoft Management Console. And our Management Console allows us to control which particular items we want to look at. So our root console at the moment is blank. We've got nothing in there. Snap-ins allow us basically to go, well, let's add something. So let's add a snap-in. What have we got in there? Add an Active Directory. And DNS, I think we had. So let's add DNS. And then that basically allows me to do both of those. So you see, I can look at my Active Directory within here. And I can manage it. To get control of it, I can raise the domain function level to show how different it is, and I can manage my DNS from within here. So we can do a variety of different things in terms of our controls. And that means rather than having to go to the start menu and run up a particular item, I can build snap-ins that are simply icons on the desktop that allow me to run the particular tools I'm after. Now, you're not just restricted to the items that Microsoft produce. You can also add different items in there. So loads of different applications such as, I'm thinking Oracle remote access services are basically formed a part of a snap-in. So we can run that as a snap-in to control it. So we can have lots and lots of different items in here that are controllable, all from these particular items. And that makes the snap-in very useful. Any questions about snap-in? It's a great tool if you're managing servers. You can basically pop on and you can control, and I can see with that snap-in, I can then see all the different servers that basically have those particular items, and I can control it in that manner. Yes, these then basically get saved as files. I can add the event viewer onto the snap-in. Remember our event viewer? So our event viewer on a server is the same as it basically is on the Windows machine. Same, it's a little bit different, okay. But as you can see, we can basically add that onto it and we can control the events. So these are all events basically controlled through the server. It contains a bit more information. The benefit of this is all these logs that our server collects about how it is performing can be sent off to a generic reporting system. Something like ServiceNow will basically, you can poke all the details of your service events and your logs to ServiceNow, and ServiceNow will know how your server is performing. But it doesn't just know how one server is performing, it knows how all your servers are performing. So you can drill down to see particular errors, or it can flag particular errors. You can go to a dashboard, and the dashboard will have a lot of green on it, of course, because you're doing fantastic and nothing ever goes wrong. Have a lot of green on it saying everything's running okay. But then it may have an orange that says, oh, this service is a little bit degraded. Perhaps it's beginning to run out of memory. Perhaps there's a warning light on it on one of the disk drives. And then it'll have a little bit of red, which is a service that's fallen over and you need to go pay attention to. But all these events can get posted up. Further to that, they can basically get posted up to security. So we have a SOC center, which is a security operations center in big companies that keep logs of absolutely everything. And they're looking for minor things that are going wrong. Could be, say, for example, someone's attempted to log on with the wrong password 10 times. That will get flagged by the Security Operations Center. And someone will say, this guy's either forgotten his password or someone's trying to hack in as him. And it will form a particular action, or it'll let a relevant security team know. So these events don't just stay on their individual server, they get collected by log collectors, LEMs, local element managers, and then posted up to whoever basically wants to be interested in those. And they create some fantastic dashboards. As well as that, we can do things such as task scheduling. Why would I need to remember to do backups? Why would I need to remember to move files about? Well, when I can basically poke it into a task scheduler. Could be I've got a particularly wobbly machine I reboot every Saturday. Okay, I can simply put that into the task scheduler. So I can schedule tasks to happen at particular times. Maybe I want to move data into my SQL engine. I want to run a particular batch job or a process. Perhaps I want to run a Python script that flushes out a whole load of data from my database to make sure that I do not then expand the data too much and pop my SQL file storage. So we can do automated repetitive tasks into the task scheduler. So as we come to it, so saving the console. So we can simply go to File, Save Console, choose a name, click Save, and where it is. And that will basically just drop it wherever you ask it to. Could be a desktop icon that you then basically link in. It could basically live somewhere else that you basically put onto your quick link menus. Did that answer that question for you guys? Any questions about MMC, the Microsoft Management Console, before we drift on to some simple troubleshooting stuff? Good stuff. Okay, so let's pop into this. So simple troubleshooting. Hold on. A lot of this stuff, corrupt files, missing snap-ins, permission issues. Some of this stuff is exactly the same as you do for a PC environment. Okay, corrupted files can cause us particular problems. Missing snap-ins. You could get MMC cannot initialize the snap-in because the snap-in could have been deleted, moved, missing. We can get permission issues. Okay, permission issues. The user is trying to open something in the console that might not have the necessary permission to do it. Or we can have an outdated MMC version. Yeah, we can update those. Solutions are the obvious ones, aren't they? Say obvious, that's not true. Try a different MMC console, recreate the MMC console, verify the snap-in availability by basically starting from a clean one and then seeing if you can add it. Check permissions, run it as admin, and run a full repair on the MMC. So the MMC is really a go-to. I know you get your main screen and your main console to start with, but everything tends to be run on servers from the MMC. Save that. Yes, I'm going to call it test. And let's just save that. This is a very useful window, this, because it simply drops you into a right place for you to add roles, add other servers, create server groups, and play with systems. We don't go into that in a massive depth because we don't need it for the CompTIA. We just need to know these services are available. And that's really the questions you're going to be asked. Good stuff. 15 minutes. Advanced commands. What are we doing here? Troubleshooting, we can basically use advanced commands to basically get us a hand, get us a step into things. One of the common commands you will basically run is ipconfig. Ipconfig will show you how your IP configuration is basically looking at the moment. And we did cover this a bit more in networks. But you know, we talked about the DHCP giving us our IP address. Sneakily, it actually gives us a bit more than our IP address. DHCP will also give you your default gateway, which in your case is your router. So that's where all the traffic needs to go. It tells you the 2 DNS servers that it should be using. And it gives you a subnet mask. And we talk about subnet masks when we get onto network, so we won't get over confused with that. Right, let me show you a very simple command prompt. So we said that's our command prompt. Here's the command running. Straight IP config. Wow, doesn't that look horrible? This is because I've got a lot of different network sockets on this. Okay, so this is really my IP4 network location and my subnet mask. My default gateway. What is your DNS server, Dave? I hear you ask. IP. Oh, config. Oh, okay. Can't even spell that. IP config /all. IP config /all will show you all the additional details. I have a DHCP server, default gateway, and other items in there. Now you can see there's a release and a renew command in there. Release will simply mean it drops the IP address. It goes, I don't want this IP address anymore, frees it up. /renew will then go off to your DHCP server and go, give me another IP address. And that's where we pop into DORA again. So we do DORA. Other useful commands. So that's our IP address. GP update. Group policies. Yeah, group policies are great. But if one of them hasn't been applied or you're having problems with some policies, you can run. He says, moving his window out of the way. You can run GP update. And GP update will force it to go to the group policy orchestrator and go, give me my policies. So if a machine has been out of the office for a week and hasn't received any of the updates, you pop it in, GP update force says you must do this, and it does it. Okay, GP update will do it in a gentle way. GP update /force will force that update. Useful if you have a system that's not quite behaving itself and applying any policies. Feel free to ask any questions about these commands as I quickly run through them. Net use is about mapping our network drives. Yes, we can do it through GP policies. Why not? That's the easy way to do it. You can also do it manually. Net space use. I don't know why they got it in twice there. Net space use H : that's the drive letter I want to allocate, is allocating to file server, shared document, /persistent : yes, means it will reattach it next time the system reboots. If you don't put persistent on there, next time you reboot, you will lose that network drive share. These are only things that you'd ever use on occasions anyway, because most of the time your group policies are going to be applying those networks, but you can do it yourself. System info. As you can see from the system info, it gathers details about your environment. Host name, operating system, OS versions, all these things we know we can do through the menu system because we've got a GUI environment. But if we're in a command prompt environment, then we can do it through this system info. SFC is basically a useful tool for fixing system issues. Corrupted systems, basically in files, can lead to various problems. SFC will basically scan for corrupted files and attempt to replace them with healthy versions. Useful, helpful tool on Windows environments. Now, remember when we talked about the kernel, and we talked about the operating system, we talked about the bits that basically live around the side of it. Well, we basically have systems in there that are run as processes. Okay, so net start, net stop basically will allow you to start and stop particular services. These can be Windows services. You might want to stop, say, for example, the printer spool if you've got problems printing on a server. So you could do net stop and that'll clear the print spool. Net start, you can restart the print spool. And we can do those sort of things. Coming towards the last of our commands, reg svr32. Sometimes a DLL, a dynamic link library, fails. The DLLs are basically like attached drivers. So sometimes a DLL might fail and we can force it to reattach it. If it's corrupted, we might have copied it across, copied a new one across, and we can force it to update with reg SVR32. And that will force it to re-register DLLs. All DLLs are registered in the operating system. When you install something like an ActiveX control or something like that, that gets registered as a DLL on the operating system. So it knows it's there. Any questions about some of those slightly more advanced commands that we might use on the system? We haven't covered the commands we use for network troubleshooting massively because we cover that in the network sessions. Cool stuff. So Windows is an ever-increasing environment. We can have compatibility modes, which allows you to run old software that might encounter problems. Because one thing you never want to do is when you upgrade operating systems, you don't want to make applications outdated. Classic for this is all account software. I was at a company once that was literally running an accountancy software that refused to run on anything other than the old-fashioned Windows Server NT. And I was trying to run it on a 2016 box. Okay. Compatibility mode lets you step back and go, actually, this particular one, this particular software doesn't like what you do and the flash stuff. It needs to basically run in that small little packet it used to do. So we have compatibility mode that we can put little things into, and we can run applications in that compatibility mode. So we can right click on the program, select properties, compatibility. Then every time we double click on that program, it will run it in the old environment. Any questions about compatibility modes? Just allows us to keep our accountants happy by running archaic software. So they don't want to pay to update. That was rude, really, but yeah. Great stuff. Okay, final piece of Kahoot then. Who's ready? Is Sebastian going to stay at the top, or is Luca going to catch him? Or is anyone else going to drive the way? 6 to 6. Final question. Let's see what we've got. Multi-select. Windows Servers offers the following services. Select all that apply. It does offer DHCP. We said it offers DHCP, didn't we? It gives us our IP addresses, gives us DNS, which is our domain name services, which basically converts long names, such as a friendly name, such as google.com, into an IP address. And it does handle our Active Directory users and computers. AdGrip, I think, is a, I picked that one out of my head. I have a feeling it's a concrete manufacturer. I could be totally wrong. Someone will correct me by looking it up on the internet. Let's see how that affects the final score, shall we? Let's have a look at the podium. Third place, Paul B. Well done. Pat yourself on the back. Well done. Second place, Luca. Well done, Luca. First place, taking home the bucket of sweeties, Sebastian. Well done, Sebastian. Some really good play from everyone. Well done. Okay, so as a conclusion, really, off the back of that, we've had a look at Windows servers. Okay, are they complicated? Yes, the operating system is different. Okay, we can do a lot more with it. We then throw into it Active Directory users and computers, where we control our users and what they can and can't do, and we control our computers and the access rights on those as well. We can look at Windows policies, which helps us really either lock things down or force things to happen. So we can install, automatically put templates, software on machines. You know, we can automatically force everyone to run Google Chrome if we like. And we can manage our networking services, who can access what IP addresses they get, where they go out, how it is controlled. And we talked a bit about the Windows compatibility mode, which simply allows us to run the old account software on our shiny new servers. That kind of brings us to the end of the lecture today. Any questions throughout what we've basically covered there? Great stuff. I hope